Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to our side event on the book resale royalty. You're all very welcome. My name is Kevin Fitzgerald and I'm the Secretary General of the International Authors Forum. And this side event is brought to you by IFRO, the ALCS, La Sofia, and the International Authors Forum. Thanks to all of them for their contribution. I'm going to introduce the panelists in order of speaking. The first, to my far right, is Geoffroy Pelletier, the Chief Executive of La Sofia. The second speaker will be Barbara Hayes of the ALCS. She's Chief Executive there. And then Florence Marie Periou, the legal counsel of La Sofia. And for our grand crescendo, we will have Jewel Green, an author from Tobago. So the panelists are all very welcome. And Geoffroy, we will start with you, please.
Thank you, Kevin. It works? Yeah. Thank you. Morning to everyone. Les studied that the new book market, printed or e-book, the second-hand book market in France has experienced several changes over the course of the last decade. These developments justify the need for this unprecedented study in order to assess and try to understand them in a general economic context of growth of second-hand goods. The objective was to provide professionals and public authorities with a comprehensive overview of the second-hand book market in France. This study was carried by Sofia and the Ministry of Culture in France in 2022 and 2023 under the supervision of a scientific committee. The results of this study, published in April 2024, are available on the Sofia website, and it clearly expressed the economic stakes it now represents for the book industry. If there is only one thing to remember from this study, is that the second-hand book market is growing faster than the new book market in virtually all publishing sectors, in terms of number of buyers, in terms of number of copies purchased, and in terms of amounts spent. From 2014 to 2022, the number of French new book buyers has decreased by 12%, while in the same period, the number of French second-hand book buyers has increased by 27%. Nowadays, one book buyer out of three also buys second-hand books. In the same period, the number of new book copies sold was increased by 10%, while in the same period, the number of French second-hand book copies sold was increased by plus 100%. It was quite regular from this period, except the COVID year. And today, one book bought out of five is a second-hand book. 20% of the French book market is second-hand book. To remember, digital market, apart from the professional sector in France, is only 4%. In terms of income, the French new book market has increased by 15% in this decade, while the French second-hand book market was increased by plus 100% in the same period. The second-hand book market estimate is at least today 350 million euros. Just a word of the average book price. Neither of them, the average new book price or the average second-hand book price, has really evolved during the period. The average price of a second-hand book is 3 times lower than for a new book. This phenomenon concerns mainly literature. More than half of the used copy purchased in 2022 were literature. This is twice as much as a proportion in the new book market. If we look at some sectors, for instance, one contemporary novel bought on 4 is a second-hand book. More of this, one detective novel bought on 2 is a second-hand book. 50% of the detective novel market is second-hand book. One fantasy or sentimental novel bought on 3 is a second-hand book, and for the teen or youth novel, it's 1 on 4. If we give a look at the trend in the number of copies purchased between 2018 and 2022, we can see that for every publishing sector, the increase of the second-hand books copies is higher, and sometimes much more higher, than for new books. When it's blue, it's higher. For contemporary novels, for detective novels, for science fiction fantasy novels, or for romance novels, it's always an increase that is higher than for the new books sector. Sometimes the new book sector has a decrease on the same period. And it's even more true for young adult novels or children novels, with plus 137% or 157% increase in that 5 years period. It's less the truth for children books, but it still remains the same for the comics. And there is one exception to the publishing sector. It's for mangas. Mangas, it's quite the opposite. We have known in France an increase of 200% for the new books, as it was no in 2022. There was no market for the mangas second-hand books. For human and technical sciences, unfortunately, both are decreasing on this period. Why these figures? Because we are facing now a double paradigm shift. Firstly, since the internet boom, no buyer of second-hand books can now have access to all very recent books and in very good condition at a price which is 30% to sometimes 50% lower than the price of the new books, and to almost all in-commerce or out-of-commerce books. Internet sales represent today only 1 new book bought out of 5, when it's more than 1 used book out of 2 in the internet. So it proves the importance of the internet for this market. And secondly, after the development of online sales platform, we are seeing the developments of platforms that allow commercial exchanges between consumers themselves. For instance, Vinted, that you all know, and this reinforces the phenomenon. If we take a look at the profile of the second-hand book buyers, we can see that they are very similar to the buyers' profiles for new books. There is no significant gender difference. 43% are men and 57% are women. There is no significant age difference. The main age range is between 35 and 44 for both second-hand book and new books. If you want to find a real difference between them, and I can assure you it was not intuitive, it's another representation of higher socio-professional categories among the second-hand book buyers. If we look at the motivation, we can see that motivation to buy second-hand books are mainly economic. It was cited by 76% of them, and it's either to buy a book at a cheaper price or either to buy more books for the same amount of money. And very secondly, it's only cited by 33% of the people. It's an environmental consideration. If I may add that 25% of second-hand book buyers exclusively buy for themselves. That means that 75% buy second-hand book for other people, and sometimes they offer it as a gift, which is a new behavior in France at least. If we look at the substitutability of second-hand book purchases, you have to know that half of second-hand book buyers, they often buy second-hand books when they originally thought they would buy new ones. Mostly by the price opportunism, the internet offers you to buy a second-hand books while you wanted to buy a new book, but the price is cheaper, and sometimes it's a good condition for the book. And sometimes they buy it by necessity when the title is out of commerce and you have no other choice than to buy it as a second-hand book. It expresses the high volatility of attachment to new books. It's comparable to the integrating between the pocket and the large format book. You want to buy a large format and you find a pocket, which is cheaper, and then you buy the cheaper one. If we look at the premeditation of the second-hand book purchases, previously, when you will find a second-hand book, it was by chance. But from now, the purchase is much more premeditated. 56% of book buyers start by looking to see if the book they want to buy is available as a second-hand book. And 64% of book buyers frequently compares prices among second-hand books to find the better price or to find the better condition book. Why? Because there are many tools that are now available. You can set an alert to be alerted when the title is available in a second-hand book condition. You have price comparison websites, so you can see if one site or another one offer you the same title in a second-hand book at a different price or different condition. It's like there was a true professionalization of the second-hand book buyers since a few years now. And it's quite the last slide. We take a look at the profile of the resellers. 40% of French people resell books with an average age of 38, which is a bit younger than the average age of 43 for the second-hand book buyers. And for 66% of the resellers, in terms of book resold, it's less than 10 books by year and less than 50 euros by year. So they are not clearly professional, but it's the number of people who resell books that maintain an offer of quite every book you want to find. You can find it now in second-hand book. And 30% of these resellers have sold more books in 22 than in 21. There were 50% of them are under 35, so it's a young behavior, but it's a dynamic behavior, and year after year it increases. And the last figure, 42% of second-hand resellers resell books that have already bought in second-hand. So we talk about second-hand book, but maybe we should talk about third-hand book or fourth-hand books in this case. As conclusions, we have now an immediate availability of all recent books. We have a generalization of the second-hand practice. We have a greater premeditation of second-hand purchase, which leads to a significant and continuously growing share of the second-hand book market, now in France, and I think maybe elsewhere in the world, with, if I may say, no revenues for authors and publishers in this case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geoffroy. Are you shocked? I was really shocked when I saw those figures 6 months ago, and that's why I thought we had to air them to a larger audience. 350 million euros of value, none of which is being shared with the original creators, with the authors, or the illustrators. So I was shocked. Some of you were shocked, because some of you nodded your heads. All right, let's move on to Barbara, please, because Barbara is going to tell us the story of an experiment in this space, in her market. Barbara, please.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Yes, I too was shocked, and I'm very glad that I'm not a detective writer. If one in two of my books would be sold on the second-hand book market. So note to self, not to go down that route. Anyway, good afternoon, distinguished delegates, colleagues and friends. As Kevin said, I'm Barbara Hayes, Chief Executive of the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society, also known as ALCS. I'd like to thank La Sophia, actually, for carrying out this survey, because, yes, when we saw it, we were very shocked with the real loss that is shown by this survey to authors and creators. And certainly in the UK, it's something that we are looking to do, to carry out a similar survey to see whether it's around the same numbers, and I have a horrible feeling that it might be. But I think because of because this survey shows the enormity of loss of incomes for authors on a scale probably not previously recognised, I think that this is something that we need to do. So to give you A little bit of background about ALCS. We're the UK's collective management organisation for writers. Our primary goal is to make sure that authors or writers are fairly paid when their work is used. We've been around for 48 years, represent more than 130,000 authors across all genres. We collect and distribute royalties for the secondary use of creative works, returning over £47.5 million GB pounds annually to writers. We work closely with our unions, the UK Society of Authors in this case, international networks like IFRO and the International Authors Forum. And we want to uphold the simple principle that when creative work is used, first or second time round, or third or fourth, as Geoffroy said, the creator should be rewarded. So it's a pleasure to speak to you today about an initiative that sits at the intersection, we think, of innovation, fairness, and copyright in practice. And we call this in the UK author share, which we believe is a model for fair reward in the secondary market. So author share is a pioneering UK initiative that ensures writers are rewarded when their books are resold on the second-hand market. A partnership between ALCS, the Society of Authors, and forward-thinking used booksellers, lately those being World of Books and Book Barn International, though we are continually talking to potential new partners on this as well. So together, we created a voluntary mechanism that recognises and supports a simple message that creative work continues to generate value long after the first sale, and that people who created them deserve a share of that value. So author share has turned into a practical, voluntary, industry-led solution, operating without legislation, although, to be totally honest, we realise that that is not ideal. Through collaboration and shared purpose, with a clear governance structure, and this organisation will do the right thing by creators. For ALCS, author share builds directly into our mission to secure fair remuneration for writers wherever their work is used, in broadcasting, in education, in reproduction, and now in resale. We manage the practicalities, collecting data, distributing payments, often very small payments, but payments nonetheless, and ensuring transparency. For the UK Society of Authors, their focus is on advocacy, keeping authors' rights on the policy agenda and making sure that new markets remain fair and sustainable. This collaboration demonstrates what can be achieved when creators, intermediaries, and businesses work together rather than in opposition. It shows that fair remuneration doesn't have to come at the expense of both access or commerce. In fact, it strengthens both. Since its launch, Author Share has distributed payments to thousands of authors, novelists, academics, poets, many of whom are seeing for the first time recognition of the ongoing life of their work in the hands of readers. It's modest in scale, but it's meaningful, and it offers a blueprint that could be replicated elsewhere across sectors and borders. When we pay out author share payments to our members, the love on social media is palpable. It explodes. Creators are really pleased to see that their work has ongoing life, and indeed, probably just as important, that they're getting paid for it. As discussions here at WIPO's Standing Committee on Copyright and Related Rights continue to explore how creators can be fairly remunerated, Author Share stands as a proof of what's possible, an initiative that aligns perfectly with the goals of this forum, promoting sustainable creative ecosystems, recognising authors' economic rights, and ensuring that copyright continues to serve its ultimate purpose, to support creativity for the public good. In short, Author Share is about trust, fairness, and partnership. It's about ensuring that creativity, the foundation of our cultural and knowledge economies, remain viable for those who make it possible. So we hope the success that we've had in the UK can inspire similar models internationally, and I also know that the International Authors Forum welcomes dialogue with anyone who shares that vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. So there's another example of how this issue can be addressed. Now let's turn, please, to Florence Marie, who's going to give us some of the legal perspectives on this question.
Bonjour, chers amis. I would like to present you a perspective of a book resale royalty. We did this study, as you saw and you hear, Geoffroy Pelletier, the resale of used book by major online platforms such as Rakuten, Amazon, Momox, Recycling, and now Shein in the US state, as shown in the economic study in France, destroys value and causes significant harm to the book industry. That's why authors and publishers have asked the French government to establish a mechanism to compensate for their losses. And the Ministry of Culture asked the State Council its opinion about a draft proposed by the Publishers Association. And the decision was in 17th of June of 25. And he said, well, if you take a remuneration like in the internal market, it won't be against and won't be infringed the owner right to resell the support, in fact, because we don't forbidden the distribution right. It could be resell. But the exception is it's on the European directive. And that's why the Council of State opinion is found that the draft law would not comply with, as we know, the principle of the exhaustion of distribution rights established by the European directive since, you know, the music verdict against GEMA, which was ruling by the court in 1981, very long day, far away, but it has been implemented in the directive of 2001. Then it's a voluntary, it's not a voluntary contribution we ask, it's a fair remuneration, fair book resale royalty. How can we raise this important question? Our author's right can be reconsidered in the second-hand book market. You are maybe aware about this exertion of a distribution right principle. It's the first sale doctrine. It has been, of course, adopted by WIPO copyright treaty in 1996, and also in the Article 4, paragraph 2, in the directive of 2001 about copyright. The difference, it means that once a copyright holder has authorized the sale or distribution of a copy of their work, they no longer have the exclusive right to control further sale or distribution of that copy. In the UC, in the European nation, it's about a rule to facilitate the free movement of goods with the European market. And however, still 2001, we know that things have changed, and this market, the recycled books market, is no longer the same market as we took at that time. What we know, what we can know, it's about there are exceptions to the exertion of distribution right. There is a form of compensation already exists for artists' resale right of an original work, of course. It was born in French, in a French act in 1920 for artist estate. It was concerned work of art original, but also, at that time, original writer's manuscript when it was sold on the second-hand market. It has been adopted by the Berne Convention and also by the directive. We also have the rental and lending right will not be exhausted by any sale of the copy of a book. And this is important because for Sophia who collecting the public lending right, when the library purchase books, when they purchase a book on the second-hand market, they could have given this public lending right. It's legal, and we can ask it. There is also the private copy levies, who are now applied to reconditioned phones and tablets and laptops and so on. That's why we believe that this exhaustion principle could not longer fit the booksetters because as we saw, it was intended for maybe new support, small-scale, local, individual resales, and absolutely not for platforms who run a massive, highly organized secondary market, when the books are second-hand purchase often replaced, we saw the purchase of new copies, when artificial intelligence push people to buy cheaper and cheaper and go to the second-hand books market. Then there's a huge revenue is diverted from authors and the book industry. And that's why we think about this principle with a limitation in the copyright law everywhere. We think that when a limitation is not fits the suitable, the steps, as you know, Article 9.2 in the Berne Convention, if it does not conflict with the normal exploitation of works or causes unjustified damage to the legitimate interests of authors, member state or author stakeholders can ask to a member state to compensate this prejudice. Then I'll see this book, personally we saw this book, as a royalty, as a fair compensation. And it could be, of course, the principle of exhaustion will continue to be applied, provided that the harm is compensated. For example, we imagine that 20 cents per book applied to 80 millions. It's a proposal, should bring at least 16 million euros in compensation. It's nearly the same amount for public lending right in France. And a portion of the revenue, because it could be a legal mechanism, should be collected to allocate it to support cultural creators, initiatives, public reading, for example, programs, and so forth. That's why we believe that the resale royalty should be established in all in the member state country at the European Union level, but why not outside, in the Latin America, for example, or in Africa. And we know that it's a possibility, and we keep working on this resale right for books, and we hope to get it and to encourage, to advocate this in your own country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florence Marie. You can see that there are some potential legal avenues to explore there. So now let's turn to Jewel, who is an author from Tobago, and she's going to give us the author's perspective on this debate. Jewel, please.
Thank you, Kevin. It's great to be here with you and to bring the Caribbean perspective, as we'd say. I would have to start by saying I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and that's not in Jamaica, okay? Nowhere in Jamaica. We are a republic, a twin island republic in the Caribbean, and bring that. Oh, no. Yeah. Is that any better? I would have to shout. Yeah, so we're a twin island republic in the Caribbean at the end of the archipelago, very close to Venezuela, if you know what's happening now. So we are, very trepidatious about what's happening. But we're here to talk about the books. I'm the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Writers Guild, and we're an organization that represents a collection of authors, formerly called the Tobago Writers Guild, and now we represent authors across Trinidad and Tobago, as well as in the diaspora. So from Jamaica, in London, we have diaspora members. We also have persons who live in the US who are members of the Trinidad and Tobago Writers Guild as well. And we have 1.5 million people. So in the Caribbean perspective, right, we're kind of large, but in the world's perspective, a very small dot. But we are looking at this issue of book resale royalty. And when I brought it to the members of the guild, it's something that this first sale doctrine that Florence mentioned, that was the existential dilemma, but I've already sold my book, what more can I get from it? And we have the idea that as authors, once you release that book, you sold that book, distribute that book, you have to kiss it goodbye and that's it. But we're having the conversation now where musicians, composers are now registering their music, and they're getting royalties from the music being played in fetes, that's parties in the Caribbean. So fetes and being played on the radio, and they collect royalties from that as musicians, as composers. And that's where we see the writers and the authors, that light bulb go on, and they now want to have a conversation about it because now they feel, oh, that's true, but where are we in that conversation? And when we talk about, the resale royalties issue, the conversation also comes up where I polled our members, and we represent about 400 members growing ever so judiciously, but our members seemed to have wanted more information. So I polled our members and asked how many of them would support, a platform or a policy that would allow them to receive royalties from the second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand resale of their books. And a lot of them said yes, and some said, I don't know. They wanted more information. And I think for authors across the region, in Trinidad and Tobago and in the wider Caribbean, we want more information as to how this can be possible. How would we collect the remuneration? And those who are still stuck on the first sale doctrine, how do, but I sold the book already, I still gonna, I'm still looking to receive remuneration for it. And that's the issue of copyright. That's still your intellectual property out there and being used in different spaces. So we talked to many of them about that, and the author resale right is what they want more information about. And the idea, the philosophy that they're no different than a musician with their copyright, than a composer with their copyright, than an artist, a painter, a sculptor with their copyright. This is very much the same. And based on that conversation, we see they're asking for more information. I brought to their awareness this survey that was done. And when they saw the loss, because, one of them said, but, it's just a couple dollars here and there. It's not that much. When I brought to them the, the scale, the magnitude of the loss, that's when they said, oh, well, if we're talking about that, now that's a different story. And I think for writers, for everybody, for humans, once we have the data, because it is in the absence of the data, sometimes we don't understand the scope of what we're discussing. But in the presence of data and in presence of surveys and things like that, now we get a better understanding of what the revenue loss is for an author and what the possible revenue gains are. Now, I know the figures may be hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. They don't all go to one person. But as an author, seeing your revenue decrease over the years, and you're wondering, how can I make a living off of writing a subject and a topic, a profession that I really love? I want to be doing this full time. And we in the Caribbean have quite a quandary in terms of making sure that this is something an author can do full time. This is something that they can do, not as a side hustle, as they say, and not as a part-time gig, but something we can do, wake up in the morning and you start to write. You publish on a regular basis, and you have a body of work to show as an author, and not, perhaps just a 1-2 books because you write when you have free time. And this resale conversation is now giving authors the idea that perhaps revenues can come back to them, more revenue streams than what they originally thought was possible. And therefore now it's something that they can look at, not just on a national level, Trinidad and Tobago. You know, my books are being sold in Trinidad and Tobago, but perhaps regionally as well as now internationally. You know, how am I going to get those, you know, the royalties, the cents on the dollar, to come into my revenue stream, and therefore make this profession that I am into more a viable profession and something that I can live off of, and something that I can earn a living wage off of during the course of my lifetime. So in terms of the fair remuneration, I think that is in itself a conversation that all authors would like to be part of, for us to discuss what does the concept of fair mean. And I know it may mean different things to different authors in different territories, but that is a conversation that this topic of book resale royalties brings to the fore and allows authors to have. So for our Caribbean authors and writers, for our Trinidad and Tobago writers and authors, those in the diaspora, we're very much interested in this conversation. We're very much interested in collecting more data for our territory, for our region, so that we can bring this possibly to those who have the say to bring policies into enactment and to make this something that could possibly be a law. So, you know, in the absence of data, again, you know, it's hard to discuss this when people think it's a pennies on the dollar conversation. It's just a couple, you know, dollars here and there. But when you look at the loss that has been identified by this French study, we can now try to extrapolate what's happening regionally and what's happening internationally for local authors whose Caribbean material is coming more and more into vogue. And as you said, Barbara, you know, I'd hate to be a detective writer and lose all those, you know, all those royalties and books, but a lot of our writers are writing work that is introspective of the Caribbean experience and sharing their biographical experience of life. So I think this is something that it's not just a viable conversation, but it's something we're looking to perhaps create a data set for the Caribbean and therefore be able to take this to the THA, and that's the Tobago House of Assembly that governs Tobago separately, and then to also simultaneously take it to the Parliament in Trinidad and Tobago that governs Trinidad and Tobago as the Twin Island Republic, and have those rights represented fairly in policy and in law.
Thank you very much, Jewel, for sharing your ideas, and in particular for consulting with your members to gather together their thoughts and aspirations. So those are the presentations that we wanted to share with you, and now we're going to open the floor for comments or questions. We do have people online on Zoom, so if you're on Zoom, then just push the call button and we will invite you to speak. And for those people in the room, push your button, raise your hand, wave at me, tell us who you are and where you're from. So the floor is open for comments. Nicole.
Thank you very much to the IAF for this to bringing up this important topic, which is also for the European Writers' Council. I'm representing Nicole Pfister-Fetz. I'm representing as Secretary General. We think it's a very important topic because we know all that the writer is doing an investment while he's writing, and we need, because it's only paid, our work is only paid by use, so every use should be remunerated, that our return on investment is guaranteed. That's a very important thing. So I thank you also, Jewel, for bringing up how important it is for the income of the author, even if every part is just a small share. I think we should also think about more studies, as Jewel also said, also on the European level where I'm representing it, also to see how, for example, it's working in smaller countries, for example, with small languages and in different conditions, under different legal aspects, and also a study on legal solutions that I think it's very important to have some new ideas how we could recommend to our members, our member associations. I have, at the end, I have just one special question to Barbara, please, because you talked about the solution you have, which is a voluntary one, but I would like to know a little bit more insights, if it's possible, how many booksellers are participating, or what is the share, do you know that, and how much, what are the numbers, I mean, you collect, but just to have an idea what a voluntary system can do and what it can't do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for that question. I was thinking that I should have probably got into more detail during my presentation on that. The monies aren't huge. It's less than £500,000 in total. We've been dealing with two organisations, but we've got two more who are talking to us about what can and can't be done. It was quite an interesting initiative, as in it was a literally coming together of the booksellers coming and saying, we want to pay authors for the sale of these second-hand books. The first time we looked at it, the amounts were so small it was probably not viable for us to do it. But once it partnered with a larger bookseller, then it became viable for us to do it. So I know Geoffroy was talking about 20 cents per book. This is nowhere near this. This is probably more like a couple of pence per book. But it was amazing the job satisfaction that people got by that we saw on social media by knowing that their books were being resold, and the fact that, my goodness, they were actually getting something for it, which is definitely a first that we've heard of. So it is about true partnerships, and it is about, I suppose, from the booksellers as well, it's good PR because they are doing something for, I guess, ecologically, and also for the authors. But it is really the authors that they want to make sure gets paid in this way. So it was enlightening, and we just wish more people would come to the table. That's why it's very interesting to hear Geoffroy and Florence, talking about what could be done legislatively, because on a voluntary basis, of course, that allows people to come in and decide maybe next year they don't want to do it, or they haven't made enough to make this a viable proposition. So it's an initiative. It's something that we, as I say, we're talking to more booksellers about. But, if there was a legal way of doing it, then that would be better. When we originally launched this at the UK House of Commons, the number of politicians who said, oh, this is just fantastic, and I think they were talking about that, oh, that's great because we don't have to legislate for it. So there's always difficulties, and certainly in the UK, our politicians would think it's better if we could do something on a voluntary basis that saves them doing anything. But it doesn't give you the certainty that you might have if you go through the legislative process. And I think, as Geoffroy and Florence have shown, there's a lot of obstacles, concerns that one has to get over to get to what is the right thing to do. And I'm a firm believer in do the right thing, not the easy thing. The easy thing is to do nothing. The right thing is to have these discussions and to see what's possible. And I think the idea that the survey has been done I think is really good. As I said, we in the UK are going to be looking at this as well to see how big this market is. And as Kevin said, he was shocked, and so were we when we first all saw it, earlier this year. It really is shocking that so much is not coming back to the creative community. So thank you for that question, and I hope that answers most of your questions, but we can always speak offline later. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Nicole. No more questions are being raised from the floor. I wonder if there are... Oh, we do have a question. Thank you.
Je suis Madeleine Cheb du Health and Environment Programme. Ma question est surtout posée à la France, compte tenu du fait que nous avons la francophonie en Afrique centrale et puis en Suisse aussi. Et je m'étonne pourquoi est-ce qu'on parle tout le temps au niveau de la culture, au lieu de cultiver la culture française, on parle tout le temps en anglais. Ça, c'est ma première question, au lieu de favoriser aussi le français. Donc, la deuxième question se porte aussi sur les éditeurs en Afrique. J'aimerais savoir à quoi sert la SACEM exactement. Est-ce qu'elle travaille pour la France? Est-ce qu'elle travaille pour l'Afrique francophone? Et comment est-ce qu'il faut faire pour s'affilier à la SACEM? Et je crois que la dernière question sera sur les livres d'occasion. On n'a pas trop de promotion des reventes parce que ceux qui donnent les livres pour les populations défavorisées, c'est ceux qui ont les moyens. Et les populations défavorisées qui rachètent les livres d'occasion ne sont pas subventionnées. Donc, qu'est-ce que vous pensez de ce secteur, vraiment, comment le développer en Afrique centrale, par exemple? Parce qu'en Suisse, je crois que ça n'existe même pas. Merci.
Thank you for your question. I'll just do a brief summary in English for those who may not have followed. So, as I understood, the question is, how does this translate, how does what has been said here translate to Francophone Africa? And also, how are those who are less fortunate in the African region going to be included or benefit or not be prejudiced against by such a scheme if it were to come into place? So the question was directed at my French colleagues, so I don't know if you would like to have a go at that. Geoffroy, perhaps, or... Thank you, Florence.
French language. Thank you for the French language, la langue française. I think we talk about, sorry for the English, but I will translate in French after. We talk about SOFIA. SOFIA is a collecting society for writers and publishers and books. And for example, for public lending right, you can, as an African author or organization, ask for the PLR, the French public lending right, if your book has been purchased by a public library or university, you can be remunerated. The second thing, we are not SACEM, it's author and writers, SOFIA. It's very new and young society, but the second thing, I believe that, of course, you did that also with a private digital levy copying. It was implemented in a lot of countries of Africa, on the west, east, maybe, yes. And it's important to know when you have legal remuneration, legal scheme, you can get 75% for authors and writers, for example, and 25% to support reading program to help poor people, for example, to come to access for reading and to buy books. Things could be organized when it's a legal remuneration. That's why the model we will follow, it's the digital private levy copying. In France, 25% come back to support the creators. And also we have programs to support things, the diffusion of the literature and reading programs. Donc en français, ça veut dire que effectivement nous ne sommes pas la SACEM, que nous reversons le droit de prêt à tous les auteurs, y compris des auteurs dont les organisations dépendent de pays étrangers, dont l'Afrique par exemple, pour les livres qui ont été achetés et achetés par les bibliothèques françaises, et que le modèle que nous suivons pour cette rémunération que nous pensons être un mécanisme légal, qui serait pour compenser un préjudice, serait de prévoir une action culturelle en faveur de la lecture, de la diffusion des livres, en faveur de la diffusion de la culture, en faveur de la création et des créateurs, comme on le fait déjà pour le système de la copie privée. Voilà.
Merci donc pour la question et pour la réponse également. So while you're thinking of any other contributions, I was wondering if there are countries or markets out there who are already thinking about this issue, or are there any studies or figures which have been done or might be done in the near future? Are we aware of any? No?
Thanks, Kevin. Just from a UK perspective, we're talking with the UK Society of Authors, and we're quite keen to utilise the type of questions that have been asked in the La Sofia survey. So from our perspective, we are very interested in finding out what the scale is. And I think, as Nicole said, it would be great if more organisations, countries could be persuaded to do something similar, so that we can look at the bigger loss to creators. And I think that will help give us a strong voice, especially when making some of the points or jumping over some of the hurdles that it looks like we may have to jump over to get legislation. But I suspect it will be a long, drawn-out battle to try and get there. But I also think, as I said before, let's do the right thing, not the easy thing. And we've got to start somewhere. And I think this survey was a brilliant springboard.
Kevin, if I may add, the survey was a French survey, yes, but I cannot believe that this is a French topic. The main actors, the international super platforms, they do the same everywhere. So maybe to calculate the loss for all authors and publishers, you take 10% of the world book sector income, and you will find the loss for all authors and publishers all over the world. And the figure will be very high and very shocking, as you said, Kevin. If I may add something to what was said for the Francophone Africa, it's something we have heard also in France. The main difficulty on this topic is to fight a lot of a priori, a lot of preconceived opinions. Like the book resale royalty will limit the access to books. It's all studies conducted in France over the years. They show that price is absolutely not a barrier to access to books and reading. It is most often mentioned at the very last on the list. It's lack of time, it's other activities, it's social media, it's a lack of habit or interest in reading, but it's never the price of the books. And today there is a commercial access to the books through bookstores. There is a free access through libraries. And now there is a discount access via second-hand books. But this latter access is not free, and it generates enormous profits for international platforms. Authors and publishers, they have nothing against the development of this market. However, we want the value to be shared by everyone. If it's 10% of the world book sector, it will change the life for authors and translators and visual artists.
Thank you very much. So we're going to be drawing a close in a moment, because you will need to get your coffee before you go back to the afternoon plenary. But I have one question that we need to resolve between us, and that is, where do we go from here? We've identified a study in France, we've identified a forthcoming study in the UK. Hopefully, we will have stimulated one or two other markets to undertake studies. It would be great if we could remain in contact on those. But there will be the results of the UK study. So my question to this whole group is, how should we share those, in what format, in what place, and in what group? We've been very fortunate to have this side event at WIPO, and we're very grateful to WIPO for facilitating this, but we can't have these meetings every SCCR. That's not going to be possible. So how should we share the next set of results and plan the next steps? Are there conferences coming up where most rights holders will be present? Are there any suggestions?
As I said, for the European level, I mean, the European Writers' Council is organizing every year a conference at its AGM, as an annual General Assembly, where we have a burning issues conference. So maybe I can discuss with our board if we could bring up it as a topic on a European level. That's at least something that we can do, not worldwide, but on a European level at least.
Thank you, Nicole. I think that would be a welcome opportunity. Yes, please.
I need to share an Arabic story, which is a reality in the Arab world. Which in 1907 there was an Azbakiya boundary wall second-hand book market. The Azbakiya in Egypt was all gardens and parks and coffee shops and a place for the artists and writers to meet. So they used to sell books, second-hand books there since 1907. So nowadays, being developed and being made 130 bookshops, proper bookshops who could buy new books beside the second-hand books. But there is a tragic story that now you could buy books there in Azbakiya, second-hand books by kilogram. So they sell 1 kg with 100 pounds. That means equals around 1.5 Swiss franc, 1 kilogram. It's really tragedy, but it's happened there as a poor country but this huge market, there is lots of buyers there, which is they buy maybe the 5th, maybe or 10th second-hand owner. They could resell and buy for schools and universities. And it is tragedy, but this happened there. It's being developed by the Egyptian government, but still, and it's 24 hours. You could go anytime, and eventually, when the book Cairo Book Fair, it's the huge traffic at the same time in the second-hand book during the same. So I wish if you go to the Cairo Book Fair, have a look. And it was being built in 1907 by default. The boundary wall was quite low. So I have my used books and put them and sell them just like that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your kind invitation to Cairo, a wonderful city. Okay, so I have heard a few really important things today. The first is that there's 350 million euros of value in one market alone, which is not being shared with authors and visual creators. I heard that in this one market, there's the potential for authors to earn 16 million euros, which is equivalent to what they earn from public lending right. And we all know that authors need multiple sources of income to enable them to contribute to the creative economy. We heard that musicians and artists are able to benefit from the further sale of their works, and I think that's an important principle to bear in mind. And so what we will do, IFRO, La Sofia, ALCS, and the International Authors Forum, we'll take away this information, we'll take a look at the information which is going to be generated from the study, and then we'll see how we can take this matter forward. So thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for participating. And a big thank you to the panelists who've come from quite a distance, certainly in the case of Jewel. So let's say thank you to all the panelists. Thank you very much.